Buenos días a
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third day in the Sustainability Conference hosted by Red Eléctrica that we are holding at this museum, the Art Center Reina Sofia. I have the pleasure to introduce you to Miguel Ángel Tobias. He's going to be the conductor today. He is a producer, yes, yeah, okay, that's money that she's talking about, yeah. And he's also a director of documentaries. He has traveled across the world, and he has always focused on social issues. Well, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with you. Irene Gomez Barrio, she is the head of the sustainability department at Red Eléctrica, but everybody has a past. She used to be head of investor relations, and I was really lucky and really keen to see how she came from the dark side to the light side, to make wonderful things happening. So yeah, this is a challenge. It's been a challenge, and I'm thrilled to be doing this. This is a very special day that I wanted to share with you. We were actually cherishing our new approach that will be introduced today, the new ESG approach in the group, the new ESG strategy. Beatriz Corredor, our chairperson, she will be presenting it today. It is a true pleasure to do this, and we will have top caliber panels and panelists. We will be speaking about social impact, contribution to businesses, to a sustainable future, and to accompany the company society in this adaptation towards climate change. So and we will have authorities from the different ministries that will be also here with us today. So this is going to be an extremely interesting day, speaking about society and all related issues. So without further ado, Miguel Ángel, I'll leave it to you. Well, a round of applause for Irene. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome not only everybody here, but also everybody who's following us and watching this from your screens, laptops, mobile phones. So I had a chance to attend this conference also yesterday and the day before, because this has been lasting for 3 days, and I believe that we have come to realize that we are in the midst of the most important debate in human history. It's sustainability. Everything we do must be aimed to improve the lives of people and the planet itself. When I was invited to host this, to be conducting this third day, well, of course, to me this was a very much welcome opportunity. But I always thought, okay, you need to have the moral authority to do things. It is easy to say things, but then it's something much different to do things, to take actions. I've been shooting documentaries across the world, going to very remote places, to seeing the most vulnerable people, trying to help disseminate their predicament. And and what you can see is that the impact of natural disasters, it's always the most vulnerable people in the world, the poorest layers of the population, who actually pay the price in the end. So it is extremely important, and I'd really like to congratulate everyone in Red Eléctrica, the chair, Beatriz, and Fatima as well. And I'd really like to spend a few minutes giving you my views on the responsibility we have all towards sustainability. Of course, public institutions need really the key players, because it's in their hands with their policy making and decision making, and we need to hold them accountable. But sometimes, we must clarify things, because public figures and governments are not really the ones in command. The ones in command should be us, because they are all representatives. So it is actually us who must tell them what they need to do. Now, this is the first time in many years where actually society and the citizens are actually supporting businesses and saying that businesses are the drivers of change. And so it is a shared responsibility. Businesses, the self-employed, all of us as individuals in the business community need to actually face that responsibility. Of course, the main responsibility in a company is to generate employment, jobs, etc. But we need to be much more aware of our responsibilities as well. Academic institutions need to train citizens, students in a cross-cutting manner, where sustainability and the social impact of everything we do is included in a horizontal manner in all the curricula and syllabuses everywhere. And us in the media, we have a huge power. We are actually, every one of us, we wear, we eat, we buy everything that we see in the media, on the internet. We imitate like monkeys everything we see elsewhere. So the mass media need to be responsible, stop broadcasting rubbish in many senses, and try and focus more on people who can actually be exemplary to the rest of society, to be role models for all of us. So, and then the citizens, we have the power. Before the internet came to be, we felt alone. We felt isolated. Citizens didn't feel that they had an individual power to do things. But now things are, but the actual reality of the matter is that, it's actually, we do have the power. We are not alone. We are millions of people who can be networking and doing things. So we are responsible as well. So it is on all shoulders. It's our responsibility as citizens to do whatever we can to make governments, businesses, the media do what we know they need to do. And so we all share our responsibility. We are all accountable. And today is a great day, because without people, there's nothing, everything that we discussed yesterday and the day before, the economy and environment, leads to the human being. No action that is not people-based can be successful. People at the center of things, that's what's most important, and that's why today is such an essential topic that we cover, the social element as a driver for transformation. That's going to be the first panel. And before that, I'm going to show you a video, a wonderful video that we have prepared just for you.
Building a sustainable, stable world should not only be viewed in terms of the things we must stop, but also the things we will gain. David Attenborough. We know that it's time for a change. We know it's time for us to be up to all of those challenges that we'll be facing. It's a transformation that should not be guided by uncertainty, but rather by the hope that we can build a better future. A future that will only come if we can look towards that future from a new perspective, looking at everything as a whole. A committed vision with green, digital development and a competitive prosperity that is at the same time just and inclusive. Red Eléctrica Group, in our capacity as the global infrastructure operator of essential services, is well placed to lead and accelerate this essential change. We're ready to be able to take nationwide an urgent transformation that will balance out and harmonise the economic recovery, social development and revitalisation of our natural environment. This is what lies behind our social commitment. We want to be much more than a grid of energy and connectivity, to be able to put that energy and connectivity to work for life. It's a social commitment that will take us to become the company that will be leading the creation of transformational environments, acting as a catalyst for change that promotes and proposes actions that can give them a mentor development in all different facets all across the country, fearlessly embracing our responsibility to contribute to the sustainable blossoming of communities wherever we can be, measuring our success in the energy model transition in terms of the welfare that it generates in people, and above all, extending out right across the country opportunities for life and future. Because we are the Red Eléctrica Group, a great grid of life that is connected and full of energy, with a transformational idea for the future, with a decent mission, with a broad brush historical vision and a profound sense of responsibility. We are the Red Eléctrica Group, and our social purpose is to end up being a great grid of life for everyone.
Qué bonito.
That was a lovely video, and the only thing that I heard about is that I wasn't asked to make that video myself. It was so nice. So yes, to be a great grid of life for everyone, that sounds lovely. We have, as you can see, with us our two speakers in this session, Beatriz Corredor, who is the chairperson of Red Eléctrica Group, and Alberto Barrero, who is a strategist. He works for Transformational Studio, and he always tries to work out strategies that have a responsible view for the future. Beatriz, first of all. Miguel Ángel, tell us about this. Alberto, you tell us. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's lovely to be sitting here on this sofa with you, Beatriz, and to be talking to all of you out there about something that is so crucial to the current times that we're living through. That is business as a transformational capacity to be an agent for change. I think that is our number one priority. I do have a couple of questions for you, so we can have a chat, and then you can present the strategy to us. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the role of companies in promoting the interest of one and all, not just the interest of the shareholders. It's a stakeholder economy. This is a more cross-cutting, open approach, broad brush approach, and that is what has brought us here today to talk about ESG perspectives. And despite the inertia of the market, the financial pressure, I think we are witnessing a change in the paradigm, the way we understand economic relations and the role of business in our society. It seems to go beyond now the business, as Friedman says. As I say, it's a change in paradigm. Well, how do you see it? Can you hear me? Yes, I hope so. Yes. So good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. This is, of course, the third day on sustainability in Red Eléctrica. Thanks, hello to all of you out there at home. Thank you, Alberto, for being with it. If you saw that video, you'll be thinking, there's no infrastructure, no electrical infrastructure in that video, and this is an electricity company. That's just what you're saying, isn't it? Why people and places in that video? It's true that the economic paradigm of the 19th century was all about business and making money for the shareholders and the bottom line, basically. But things have moved on since then. I think that the recent crisis, the 2008 crisis, and also the pandemic have changed our mindset. Yes, market is a good thing, but we still also need to be able to create welfare for the communities that we have an impact on. Impact is the word, but positive impact. Of course, we can have an impact in different ways, can't we? We could have a negative impact, which is perhaps what we have seen, and I've seen it. I saw the presentation that Ricardo made, the CEO. We saw that, and it's pretty terrifying, isn't it? This unstoppable process that we're seeing. So I think there is growing interest in the general public, particularly young people, about this, and I'm very hopeful about the fact that they all understand that we have to change the way we consume and produce and the way we as businesses operate and make sure our impact is always positive. We have to make sure that we do things better than when we got here. The pandemic, yes, the pandemic, I think, made us really understand how interlinked business and society is. Did you think it was ever in question? Absolutely right, yes. the idea that the only way for us to progress is to have this mutual trust and make sure that we can link the goals of the business with that social impact that you're talking about. Do you think we really do understand and appreciate that interlinkage between business, society and environment? Or are we still perhaps just thinking we have the right intentions? No, I think that time's gone by. Yesterday, somebody said that we've been listening to scientists for 40 years and then politicians and then international organizations talking over and over again about this. And this is now the time for action. And there was the Paris summit, of course, and then there was, of course, the 2030 agenda that was defined with the SDGs, and it's time for action. Yes. We've seen, even over the last few days, how profitability is linked to sustainability. Investors, of course, they're the ones behind listed companies who are out there. That's where they're putting their money. And we've seen that in a KPMG study that was done on the CEO Outlook 2021. They said that more than 80% of Spanish and international companies now have those ESG strategies. It's true that we also have this greenwashing concept, don't we? Everyone knows that this matters now, and the numbers add up. It's the same thing with corporate social responsibility. Remember that, Alberto. There was one way of trying to actually basically to ask for forgiveness for what we were doing out there in society. But it's true that if you ask CEOs in Spain, 50% of them say that, yes, those strategies for sustainability do improve financial results. It's true, and I think we might hear this later, that you can, if you've joined a company and you see that you're starting to bring in the common good and welfare into the balance sheet, that if you put it in there in your balance sheet and your profitability, then as you move forward, you can see the results. And you'll see that. You can see that in the non-financial information that is reported, and you can see when very soon, a few months' time, the financial information, non-financial information will actually matter as much as financial reporting. I think that is when we as companies will be able to tell you exactly what we are. There are indexes out there that measure our sustainability, and that the greenwashing won't be possible. You will have to have the real strategy, and then I'll talk about what strategy is still to be recovered. Listening to you, I do see that this is a very delicate moment in time because a lot of expectations being raised. Expectations? No, not expectations. There are demands being placed on us. It's not just expectations. Okay, those demands that can turn into greenwashing, that is dangerous because you could let people down, let their expectations down. And there was the Edelman study from 2021 that said that companies are the most trustworthy institutions. There were 4 types of institutions: business, governments, NGOs, and media studies. And the level of trust is 61% worldwide. And business is the only institution that's considered to be both ethical and competent. So there's a huge opportunity there, but there's also a risk that you let people down, that you don't live up to the trust that's placed in you. First. Let me say, I'm very worried about the fact that society trusts, not that they should trust, but the fact that they don't trust governments. You can see there that there is a problem that we have to deal with, and because, of course, governance depends on democratic institutions involving participation, national, public, or sovereignty. So it's important there. And if there are trends that are perhaps making it difficult to see what is real and what is false and what is fake, I'm worried about that globally. I mean, we need to see how much influence there is there for decision-making in their institutions. And NGOs, they're not trustworthy either. What have we done wrong? So that some institution that is so devoted to the common good is not trusted. Perhaps people have seen that businesses can act and do things more immediately. And so, yes, we do have that enormous capability, but that is something that we have seen through the pandemic. People, I like to talk about people, have understood that with an emergency like COVID-19, the only way to actually solve the problem is to have institutions operating and businesses operating as well. I'm thinking about the crisis, about supplies, the fact that we jumped in there to help out with face masks, medical supplies, and of course vaccinations. I mean, without that collaboration between the public and private sector, you wouldn't have got that quick rollout. We've never seen this before, have we? Yes, obviously, the pandemic has really thrown out a whole load of challenges that were perhaps already latent in there. I've made a note of a couple here. One is equality, of course. Increasing inequality. We're looking at the pandemic might be able to put an end to 25 years of increasing gender equality. There's also a global report on women and money by Fidelity International. It analysed experiences and opinions of women internationally in 6 markets. And the result was that 31% of women had seen a reduction in their saving capacity over the last 12 months compared to 26% in men. Challenges, yes. Miguel Angel was talking about challenges before. And I think the gender inequality, every time there's a crisis, we women, I think, are pushed back. Women are more and more discriminated. If we talk about race, women are also more discriminated. Poverty, the same. Disability, the same. Women are always doubly discriminated against. And it's true, the crisis has made that worse. That's the negative side. The positive side is, I think, just as we've seen in businesses that they're important. We've seen that the caring society, the carer society is needed. We will all need to be looked after and cared for at some point in our lives. And that has also really put the spotlight on the capabilities, the capacities or skills are typically considered to be female skills, because that lies at the heart of the economy. So yesterday there was demonstration for equality, and of course we're behind that. This is the right track. I represent a company here today that has some figures, excellent figures for female participation. We all have to work on that, but it's not just gender inequality, but there's also the pandemic that has widened the digital divide, the rights also of people living in cities and people living in rural communities. They don't have the same access to digital means, to cultural, to artistic, to personal resources. All of this has really been made so obvious during the crisis, and it means that now our vision must be much more centered on equality, and we're doing that in Red Eléctrica. We're trying to make sure that we overcome those inequalities by providing that balanced approach to communities, and we listen to our communities say what they need, because I think in management in Madrid or in the offices, sometimes we think that what is happening here is the same as elsewhere. That's not the case. Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Beatriz. I'd like to move on. You can start to get an idea of what we're doing with strategy. Yes, I'm getting some idea there. But let's talk about this, what we see on the screen there, which is weaving those grids of life. And the very first question for you about that is that my experience with your Red Eléctrica Group, I've seen that the social impact is intrinsic to your business. I think it's inseparable, isn't it, from your business? Well, Red Eléctrica is a company that is totally committed to sustainability, and we have been committed for years. We've talked about that now. We have centered what we're doing a lot on environmental sustainability, also governance and transparency. What was missing? And this is something I've certainly focused on, and my colleagues in Red Eléctrica know that. And we want to develop more the S from ESG. There's no legal requirement to do that. There's no legislation or rule that means that we have to do that. But we think we have to do this. That we have to have that social impact in the territory, because we are a company that take visible, tangible infrastructure all over the country. We have our fiber optics, we have our electricity infrastructure and satellites. I know you can't see them, but you need to have some ground infrastructure to be able to have the satellites there. So we are capable of getting close to the local communities, and we're able to ask them, what do you need? We do have an impact on them. We have an environmental impact on the landscape, and we have a social impact there in the communities. And that's where we're changing the mindset of the company. We have an infrastructure that impacts the territory, the land, and our vision has to be that it's not just us going along there, putting up some infrastructure and disappearing. We want to make sure that when we have gone to a community, that what we have done there is changing their life for the better, so that our impact is positive. How? by actually improving their welfare there. And we have to listen to them before we get there, before. That is why there's a total change around in our culture in the company. And I would thank the CEO and the management board and the executive committee and all of the people who work in Red Eléctrica for understanding that before we put up any infrastructure, we have to listen to what people need. That is what we have to do to be able to operate. And this is a drastic change in our culture in the company. That means that the S of sustainability, that covers all of our 2025 to 2030 and 2050 plans for our strategy, cannot be understood unless we can ensure that our technical experts can get in there and look at the environment, see what the impact will be, to make sure that the community does want to welcome our presence there, because it's their life that we will be affecting. I don't know whether I'm explaining exactly what we're doing very well. It's an engineering and infrastructure company that's changed around. So you're saying that you're taking on a role of a leadership in this energy transition? Yes, of course. If you think about Spain's recovery plan and those EU funds, what are the goals there? It's the transformation, digital, ecological, gender equality, of course. But the ecological transition, the better use of renewables, and you need to have, of course, your transmission grid. And who's behind that here in Spain? It's us in Red Eléctrica. That's why it's incumbent on us. That's a responsibility we have. And it's been demonstrated that this is absolutely essential for people's lives. And we have all our fiber optics, we have our satellites that can help us with that connectivity, make sure that the connectivity is of the same quality and caliber for people in cities and rural communities, so that everybody can have that access to that high-speed networks. And it's not just about infrastructure, it's about quality of life, economic quality, public services, cultural and personal services. You're absolutely right. Yes. So thanks to your infrastructure, we can, talent. Talent is another word there on the screen. We can't do this without people's commitment. And so I'd like to thank every single one of our workforce. The people who work for us in Red Eléctrica, they have really become aware and up to speed very quickly about how they have to put their talent to the service of people. So with this as an introduction, how would you define this mandate that you have for social commitment? We have to take the essential and critical services, electricity and communications, out to the territory, to the people, to ensure there's equal access to opportunities. Well, that's a lot to be done. Last year, we had a pandemic on our hands, and that was a challenge for Red Eléctrica because of the demand for electricity. There was less demand for electricity, there was more demand for data, traffic, and we could cope with that. And of course, this year we had that weather event, and everything went on as normal. And if that was the case, then that's because we have a company that is fully aware of the fact that it's providing essential public service for life in the broad sense of the word. And we have to make sure that we do it all equally for the whole country. So you say we want to weave little by little that great grid of life. So could you tell us who's this for? Of course, all our companies, we have to be aware of our strengths and our capabilities and how far they can take us. And Miguel Angel has been traveling all around the world for years. He knows you have to make a choice where you're going to go. We have a huge impact on the territory. So which territory? Where? So we have to say it's the non-urban area. We don't generate or sell electricity. We don't have any customers or consumers. We have the backbone structure. So our very first obligation is to combat the inequalities that are in the non-urban environment, because there's all of those people who are living in rural communities, and they need to be able to carry out those activities. There have all been the activities that people do in cities, where primary sector, farming, connectivity, even through satellites, can be used to help, even just farming, fire protection. We've heard that from people. And the secondary sector as well, the industrial sector too, there is a lot of social pressure there because of the renewables. Their infrastructure is out there. We have a lot that we can do there because they are all being connected up to our transmission grid. And then the tertiary sector services, which are quite obviously located in cities, but now they can, with digital connectivity, they can go out to rural communities. So The same goes with digital society. You can't improve society and make it more balanced without digital connectivity. We have to use our infrastructures in rural communities. We've got our high voltage lines. We've got 5G. We've got broadband width, and make sure that we can have that extra high-speed connectivity for everybody. And of course, that we have that responsibility quality, as you know, in Red Eléctrica, you've seen our figures. But the female leadership in the non-urban world is also important. It's not just farming and agriculture. I'm thinking about public services. Women should be there. We've got the education, health, public and government authorities out there. Creativity, arts and crafts, recovering that sustainable economy. Women need to be playing a role there as well. And then we also have a commitment to children and young people, because there is a risk. First of all, child poverty, that's a huge challenge. And then the fact that young people may feel that they are not involved in productive activities, and we have to provide them with the training that they need, vocational training, targeted, so that they can get the skills that you need for jobs. That is a key area for us. And we have some specific training initiatives ongoing for the different areas that we operate in. Well, I was just going over what you were saying there. First of all, you were talking about seeking balance and fighting inequality. That's one of the pillars then. And then you have the priorities on these different sections that are on the screen. And you said you're very much focused on rural communities, trying to create transformational environment, understanding that your grid is spread out all over the country. A few examples for you. There are so many, really. Because when I joined Red Eléctrica, the social investment part, how we can improve lives of communities, listening to them first of all, had a component that was really symbolic, I would say. There was a specific set of initiatives in specific places in the country. The CEO knows exactly what I mean when I say this. And my intention, since I joined, has been to turn this into a strategic pillar in the company, just as we have governance and sustainability. And of course, that needs money, doesn't it? A budget, doesn't it, Roberto? Because we have those four pillars there, but we need to be able to scale up our impact and ensure that what we're doing in the company can be reproduced and replicated wherever. So this needs to be taken elsewhere. For instance, combating inequality. We have a lovely project in Asturias. We're trying to close the digital divide there for the elderly, for rural areas, and always to try and make sure that we can help people get into the job market when they have some inequality. And there's another lovely project in Granada, in the north of Granada. We're working with NGOs to try to fight child poverty. This is 20... And there's also a program to help vulnerable young people become integrated into the job market and society. This is also crucial for our country. Women, of course. We're working with a rural women NGO. In the pandemic, we helped them to try and ensure that they could sell their agricultural products from their farms. We're still going to work with them to create a platform for them that now they will be able to actually sell their agricultural products all over. And then we've got another project to support villagers with entrepreneurs, with startup projects. They've done their market studies, and we try to scale them up so that they can have a business there in their community, and perhaps we can help them with some basic infrastructure, a house, for instance, a dwelling or something, and then we can allow them to operate online. These are just 4 different examples of the projects that we're involved in. We can do so many more, and I would encourage you to join us and to collaborate with us. There are a lot of different companies that have joined us. We have a partnership, and I would invite anybody else to join us if you want to hear about And tell us about your initiatives. We're very open to them. The CEO knows that the 22 budget for this will be another key area in our strategy for the company. So as a summary, to recap, to really just wrap up the conversation, I think we have to accept now that you as business and companies are society too. You have and it's an opportunity for all of us, the fact that you are agents for change. Yes, we have to adapt, of course. Red Eléctrica will also be a pioneer here, as it was in biodiversity and environmental sustainability. And then the competitive social transformation is another thing that what's profitable for us needs to be profitable for society. And I think this is something that's here to stay. And companies that haven't understood this will run into difficulties. It's just as people who don't understand that climate change is here, we have to adapt to it. If you haven't realized that this is the case, then you won't be able to do anything. Society may not want your services if you don't adapt. Well, it makes me really trust you as a company that you're actually trying to build a better future with the infrastructure, because we need that, especially when we're talking about technology, about service infrastructure. Can also be something that convey principles and values towards the future, and that you're talking about a future for everyone as balanced as possible, and that balance you take wherever you can go. And thank you very much. Well, I do hope that whenever now you look at one of our infrastructures as Red Eléctrica, that you will understand that behind that, behind those cables, and we have the fiber optics, we have cables, we have our satellites up there in the sky, that behind all of that infrastructure is a wish to be able to provide a public service that can make people's lives better. And if you look at us like this, as soon as you switch the light on, then you'll see what a miracle it is, and what the wealth of opportunities we have in this country. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to you. Thank you very much. I was dying to ask you questions, but there's no time. So I'm sure we'll have to have a sequel to this, part 2. But Miguel Angel, you took up some of our time. We got our revenge on you. Thank you very much. Round of applause.
Muchas gracias.
So thank you. Well, I'd like to really warmly congratulate Red Eléctrica for this exercise of placing people not only at the center, but always before everything else. In Latin America, most of all, I have had the chance of speaking with utilities, Spanish utilities that try to be located there. I told them, if you don't discuss within local communities, if we don't agree things with local communities, you won't get anything done. And those that did succeeded, and those that didn't did not. So you need to remember, people are always there. People are not only at the center but at the front, and you need to always bear that in mind. So now let's move on to the next panel. Social inequalities. What do we mean by that? We know many countries in the world where you are born at a given place in the social ladder. That's where you were born, and that's where you're going to be dying. I mean, you won't move from there. Social mobility is something that in other countries, such as Spain, we have taken that very seriously, and that's made possible to have some upward mobility. But inequalities are still there. You only need to, visit many neighborhoods and towns in Spain to see that with your own eyes. And to discuss this, I'm going to ask Jose Juan Ruiz, who is the chair of the president of the Sustainability Commission of the Red Eléctrica Group, and Clara Martínez Toledano, who is a financial economy professor at the Imperial College, London.
El pasado mes de enero, no sé si algunos de ustedes sabrán, se publicó
last January, maybe you already know this, but the triumph of unfairness of injustice was published. This book discusses how the 1% of the population in the U.S. Has almost 1%. Is this 1% of the population has earnings that are twice as much as all the working class population together, who are 50 times as many people. So what has happened in Spain in the last couple of decades? Can you tell us, Clara? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Red Eléctrica for the opportunity to discuss with you the evolution of inequality. I think this is a cross-cutting issue, and everybody, all stakeholders, both public and private, are needed to combat this major increase in inequality that has been happening in the U.S., as you mentioned, but ever since the 80s, this trend has been on the rise everywhere else. It's not been as intense in everywhere else, in all countries, in the U.S. or China, for instance. This growth in inequality has been very sharp, whereas in Europe and other parts of the world, this increase has not been as sharp. And one very particular case is the case of the Middle East, Brazil, and Sub-Saharan Africa, where the levels of income concentration are so high they could not go any further up. They have reached the ceiling. So the differences in the distribution of income in the regions, among the regions, are due mainly to policies and the impact of different social partners on them. So we do have some power in order to decide what those levels can be. In Spain, in particular, concentration of income is not as high as in Latin America or other parts of the world, but if we compare those to the rest of Europe, Spain is one of the is at the top. It's the third country with the greatest income inequality. And if we look at poverty, we can see, as Beatriz mentioned, Spain has extreme poverty levels that are some of the highest in Europe. It's the fourth ranked country in Europe, and we are close to countries such as Bulgaria and Romania. I don't want to be pessimistic. The fact that Spain is in that position does not mean that Spain has not made any progress. In the 60s, and so ever since the 60s, and in particular in the 80s and 90s, those levels of inequality were reduced. But in the last few years, the situation has deteriorated, and that's what explains where we stand now. And the pandemic has made things even worse, and this is why it is a pressing matter to be dealt with now, and this is why I think this needs to be in the business agenda. Well, I think that it is hair-raising to see how poverty is increasing lately, and I think we need to do everything we can, all of us, governments, businesses, individuals, to do everything we can to combat it. So, as Piketty said, inequality is not only political and economic, but also technological. And so we need to see what we can do, how the increase in inequality, Jose Juan, is affecting all of us, and why has it happened. Let's see if we can have the whole picture. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, President, to invite me to be here. It is a pleasure. Your question, you mentioned Piketty, but we have a Nobel Prize winner such as Joseph Stiglitz that always has covered inequality in his work. But inequality is no longer a toxic item in the research agendas of academia. Now it's become a sexy topic to research on. And people like Atkinson, Teton, Branko, Milanovic, Ollier, Duflo, there has been a number of academics who have now put inequality on top of the agenda. So, and that's important, that we need to bear that in mind. Inequality has been detected as a phenomenon that not only has an ethical or moral dimension, but also costs. It is a costly for growth, for technological innovation, and most of all, its costs are much more evident now, increasingly evident now, and that's what the president mentioned earlier on. It has a polarizing effect on societies. It undermines societies, institutions, and the rules on which we base our values and freedoms. Inequality generates a huge, enormous difficulty to reach consensus on specific topics, and that's of the essence here, because in a time such as we live now, with risks, transitions, uncertainties, to make progress in the common welfare, we can only do that if by trial and error, by experimenting. If those trial and errors to do away with the old demons of the past, if we cannot identify those and have the social backing to combat them, we won't be able to tackle them. So and inequality needs to be on top of our agendas. Now, you said you come from the dark side, and you've now come to the light. You told one of the moderators before, but yes, it is. There are many things that we can make use of now to come from the dark side into the light. We have data on microcredits, on child labor, on many things, and that information has raised awareness, has among society, and that is helping us combat inequality. Now it is something that is widely accepted. Inequality is bad for everyone. It used to be Friedman's world, the rational man theory, efficient markets. Now nobody believes that anymore. And this is a huge step forward and gives rise to this optimism that we must all have when issues are in the hands of science. It is a much better situation than when they are in the hands of beliefs or philosophies or mere trends. So when economy does not put people at the center, that's the dark side economy. That's what we could say without economy, because economy is essential. Without the economy, we wouldn't have progress. We could not even combat inequalities themselves. So, Clara, what are the repercussions of inequality on people's social behavior? Well, there's increase in income inequality, as well as globalization that has generated new winners and losers, has put on the table new cultural conflicts such as climate change, migration, etc. And these new topics are also reflected on the shift in voting preferences among the citizens. Climate change was not even mentioned some years ago in politics, and now it's on every government's agenda. Now, in this study by Thomas Piketty, you can see that this voting preferences shift has been instrumental in many cases. In the 60s, 70s, people in the working class, people with low education levels, low income levels, they voted more or less along the same line, voted for progressive parties. Now, and the higher class or high income citizens voted for more conservative parties. Now this has changed, and the people who used to be voting for more social democratic parties that were more conservative, now these voters are much more aware about the new values. The Social Democrats have been the big losers in this battle, and because there are some voters who are now shifting towards parties with greener values, but also some others are have shifted to a more extreme conservative or populist parties. If we want to listen to the citizens, we need to listen and be attentive to their voting intentions. The least educated are demanding better living conditions, but the best educated, they want for us to try and combat climate change. So we need to reach a consensus, so everybody needs to feel represented, and that's what we need to do. We need to find a way to reach a consensus there. So we have clearly a clear segmentation in society, depending on the purchasing power, unfortunately. But in the working class is increasingly aware of the climate crisis, how it can affect me. So you don't think that there is a possibility of that part of the population to have an upward mobility? Well, if society, but the issue is if the society is increasingly polarized, social partners, politicians have a much more difficult time in trying to please everyone. When there was a clear-cut division among the different social classes, well, the situation was much clearer for everyone. Now, we have the challenge of trying to combat climate change, but on the other hand, you need not to leave anyone behind, and this is going to be the major challenge we will have to face in the near future. So we need to increase social awareness and of everyone. We need to understand that we are all the same family. The day I always say that the day when humankind will finally see that there is only one race, the human race, and there's only one planet Earth, things will be much better for everyone. And in the meantime, we can only keep on doing this type of analysis and debate. Today, Jose Angel, it is impossible to combat climate change today without combating inequality. That we have no choice. I mean, we cannot separate both things. A fair transition is then one of the most important imperatives in this century. But climate justice can also bring about solutions for issues related to social justice. So they are cross-pollinating in that sense. So how can we promote a climate transition without leaving anyone behind? The problem is there, yes, but what are the strategies that we should be deploying to face it? Okay, this is a wonderful question. Just let me give you a fact. 770 million people, 10% of the human population, do not have access to electricity. And you can imagine that even though we can make an incredible technological progress, maybe we can reach net zero emissions by 2050, the problem will still be there if these 770 million people are still lacking access to electricity, to electrical power by 2050. This is what Clara was mentioning, political fragmentation, polarization, risk, populisms are one of the symptoms. So the climate change, of course, is not just one individual country's problem. It is a global problem. So the challenge is absolutely, it's a huge challenge. So we economists usually say that there are no free lunches anywhere, but there are some in climate change. 30% of decarbonization can be generated by the production of clean energy, 80% in energy efficiency measures generated by, that will be needed by climate change can be generated through the use of renewable energies that today are even cheaper than some of the most polluting sources. So, but we are speaking about 60%, 80%, and those are significant percentages. And to set all this in motion, you need both the market and the state. You won't be able to invest $4 trillion investments to reach net zero if the markets are not behind you. And this cannot be a transitional process unless those markets do not have smart regulation incentives that help accelerate the process. So this is where this collaboration between this partnership between the private and public sectors is key, and everyone will be the loser if we make mistakes there. If we generate processes such as the one that have been generated in the last few months here in Europe, if people perceive or understand that climate change means that the poor are going to be even poorer, then it's not going to work. If you don't have a popular that people support, even it will not work. People need to really understand that this is a major effort, which is putting a price on someone that did not have a price before. We need to see that if we are not able to cooperate with support the market. It works very effectively there, and without a government that is able to generate the right framework for this transformation, we will lose the people's support, and we will be losing the fight against climate change. And just one last thing about this: 770 million people. You know, you cannot be a goody two-shoes and try and think that, okay, if we stop growing, you know, degrowth is the solution. You know, these are very fashionable. This is, you know, people on top, of course, that's who are on the top of the chain to say it. That, you know, if we degrow, that's the solution. No, that's not for the poor, of course. But there is an exercise, just to give you some numbers. Max Rosen, woman data. It's I warmly recommend him. He says that you must try to take everybody to reach $30 per capita income, daily per capita income. That's what the poorest person in Denmark receives. Let's try and do this. Anyone who has a figure over those $30, let's bring it down to $30. And let's try and do this. Well, to be as rich or as wealthy, so everybody could be as wealthy as the poorest person in Denmark, you would need an economy that is 5 times the size. So it's not. So there are trade-offs here. You need to make difficult choices, and there are very different ways to go there. And you know, trying to so good ideas are not enough. The poor can only be taken out of poverty by growth. If what Clara mentioned, that Spain reached the gap of poverty by doing that with growth. And crises are always generating inequalities unless they are corrected by the state, by the government. And that's something that we must take into account, trying to have a conflict between equality and climate change. No, it's not possible. You need to be able to couple those two things together.
That's why I was saying before quite clearly that the reality is that we all have to be aligned, all of us, public institutions, academia, businesses, and the media, because of the influence that we can have, and people in general, citizens. So we're all going down the drain, aren't we? I think the drain. I think is an understatement. Yes, I think we're going a lot further down than the drain. Yes, definitely. Well, thank you very much. A round of applause, please, for Clara Martinez and Jose Juan Ruiz. Thank you to both of you. Really, I do hope that everybody here, and there are a lot of experts out there too, and listening to this, maybe from home, are finding this as a learning experience, and it's enlightening, isn't it? Because the data all never lies. Let's see if we can catch up a bit on the time that we've lost. We're a little behind, I'm being told. But anyway, let's move straight on to another crucial area that we're talking about today, which is investment with the social impact. How investments, if they're done properly, if we're investing money adequately, can change people's lives, can also drive that growth and development too, and can be a win-win situation for everybody. Let me give you some figures. Sustainable investment is still on the rise all over the world, with assets that are now totaling $35 trillion. And that's a 15% increase over the last 2 years. And sustainable investment now accounts for 36% of all assets under management. In Europe, that figure is 42%. Sustainable investment in Spain, that's with impact, we're talking about almost the 10% of ESG assets. That's almost 30 billion euros. There's also the commitment that investors are accepting to be able to measure also the progress that is impacted by their investments. So we're very fortunate to be able to hear now with a video message Sir Ronald Cohen. Now, he has been a pioneer. He has spearheaded for almost 20 years now the drive to have investment with social impact. He is the president of the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment, and also the president of the Portland Trust, as well as being director and of many other institutions. In 2012, he was awarded the Innovation Prize from the Rockefeller Foundation for Innovation in Social Finance. He's also written many, many books on investment with social impact, and he is an advocate of the world demanding companies to report on their social and environmental footprint and on their impact. Do we have our video and to be able to listen to Sir Ronald Cohen? I'm not sure I can see it here on screen. We have it now.
It's a great pleasure for me to be joining you at this Sustainability Summit organized by Red Eléctrica España. And I would like today to take the opportunity to talk to you about what I see happening in the world and how the world of impact investment is advancing. All of us on this call are probably aware that the world cannot continue to operate in the way that it is doing. Capitalism, which has served us well for 250 years, is now creating so many consequences in the wake of our search for profit that even governments are unable to cope with them. We see this happening in the area of climate. We see it happening with social inequality. And many people ascribe this to our political systems. But if you look closely, you realize that it is companies that are creating pollution. And it is companies that are creating social exclusion. And so the consequences are really the consequences of our economic system, rather than primarily our political system. And so the world began to change maybe a decade or two ago, and we began to see the values of young people lead that change. Young people refused to work for certain companies. They refused to purchase the goods of companies that were creating harm climatically or socially. This became perceived by a broader population, and investors became aware of the consequences for the profitability of their portfolios. And so we began to see a massive flow of capital going for the first time to achieve not just risk and return, but a balance between risk, return, and impact. The importance of these flows has become so great now that nobody can claim that this is just a passing thing. $40 trillion plus is flowing to environmental, social, and governance investment. $1 trillion is going to impact investment, where you have the same intention as ESG, but you measure the impact that is created. And this force comes together with two other forces that are changing the world today. The second force is one I think most of us are familiar with, and that is the new leaps in technology that are coming through artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, the genome and computing coming together, blockchain. These forces enable us today to deliver impact globally in education, in health, in fintech, in every field, in the automobile industry, as Tesla has been showing us, in ways that have just been impossible for humanity to contemplate previously. And the third force is the force of impact transparency. Impact transparency can be achieved today because of the leaps in technology. Powerful computing capacity and speed and the availability of big data have enabled us to measure the impacts of companies in ways we could never previously do. We can measure today the impacts that a company creates in monetary terms, in euros or in dollars or whatever currency you choose. The impacts that a company creates on the environment through its operations, on people through its employment practices, and on people and planet through its products. And I would like to give you a peep into the future by showing you some of the insights that we can gain from this impact transparency. I've been involved for 2 or 3 years now with an effort at Harvard Business School called the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative. If you go to HBS IWA, you can see the environmental impact of 3,000 companies today, the impacts they create through their operations. And if I say to you that 450 of these companies create more environmental damage in a year than they make in profit, that 1,000 of them create environmental damage equivalent to a quarter or more of their profit, that together they create $4 trillion of damage in a single year, you can begin to understand how comparisons between the impacts of companies are going to influence our decision making. And it's already happening. The Harvard data already shows a correlation between high levels of pollution and lower stock market valuations in many different sectors. So the weight of the ESG money is already beginning to publish the companies that are creating pollution and to favor those that are doing less harm or bringing solutions to the problems we face. That's why we see, on the one hand, the valuation of ExxonMobil fall by 2/3 over a period of 3 years, while the price of Tesla multiplied, of its share, multiplied 7 times in 2020 alone. And we begin to see shareholder activism play its role. ExxonMobil was forced at its shareholders' meeting to kick off 3 of its board members and to appoint 3 members they didn't want to see appointed. Procter & Gamble, another major US company, found itself criticized by 2/3 of its shareholders at its shareholder meeting. Why? Because of the impact it was having through deforestation on our environment as a result of its use of palm oil. And we can see now a couple of hundred shareholder resolutions being prepared for tabling at shareholder meetings in the months ahead, covering not just environmental issues, but social issues as well. Because this transparency extends also to the impact that we have on people through our employment practices. You will see very soon 2,500 companies' employment impact on the Harvard site. Companies create impact through exclusion of certain members of the task force. Well, we have measured through big data the employment of a company and compared it to the demographics outside. We've ascribed to the missing members from these different communities the remuneration they would have earned and viewed that as a cost to their communities. And so a company like Apple emerges with a $10 billion wage bill, which we would all assume to be positive impact. But when you measure its lack of diversity, differences in advancement of gender groups or ethnic groups, there's a $2.7 billion negative charge against its $10 billion wage bill. And so you can begin to see that the transparency will create a race to the top, that investors will seek to find companies that know how to optimize risk, return, and impact. The toughest part of transparency is product impact. But there too, although it's more laborious because it's sector specific, we have shown that across 10 different sectors, we can begin to measure the impacts that companies have through their products on people and planet. For those of you who wonder how quickly will this impact transparency come, my answer would be within the next 3 to 5 years. It will become mandatory for companies to publish their monetized impacts. We can already see the EU pushing for transparency on investment vehicles. the SEC pushing for transparency on corporate impacts, IOSCO, which brings together the world's regulators, pushing hard for climate transparency, and IFRS, which is responsible for all financial accounting across the world, is considering the establishment next month of a sustainability standards board to address the issue of impact transparency. And the visibility of all these efforts is increasing. The UK has set up during its presidency of the G7 an impact task force. One of its two key objectives is impact transparency and integrity. The second one is boosting impact capital flows to address the issues as we recover from COVID that are going to be faced by the most vulnerable populations, and ways in which the evolution of financial markets towards impact products can help to achieve solutions in emerging countries and in the most vulnerable parts of our nations. So impact transparency and integrity is just down the road. We saw how in the 30s, our forebears had to introduce transparency on the profits of companies. Companies at that time picked their own accounting policies. There were no auditors to verify their numbers. They were able to put into hidden reserves a share of their profit without telling shareholders. And after the great crash of 1929 in Wall Street, investors realized they'd been investing in companies without understanding what profits they were making. Well, the same is happening today. $40 trillion of investment is investing in companies searching for impact as well as profit and have no idea what impacts are actually being created. And this is creating a huge challenge of greenwashing, where companies make statements about their impacts that fall short of total and accurate disclosure. I want to give you a sense, though, that this is becoming central to our economic system. Impact is no longer a peripheral issue. And you can see it happening not just because of the push to impact transparency, which will transform investment in companies, public companies, private companies, but also in the bond market. Within the bond market, we can already see $1.5 trillion of green, social, and sustainability bonds. And within that, we can see $150 billion plus of sustainability-linked bonds, where investors give companies an incentive to invest in companies that achieve preset environmental and social targets. Novartis issued a 1.8 billion euro impact bond where the interest rate falls if its drugs reach more vulnerable populations. Enel has issued, the Italian utility, has issued $7 billion of green bonds that are sustainability linked, where the interest rate falls if Enel achieves environmental targets. And so you can see our financial system now through public companies, through the bond market, through the private equity markets, and even the venture capital markets, where specialist funds, specialist impact funds are being set up by some of the leading firms in the field. In the case of private equity, firms like TPG and KKR and Blackstone and Bain and Partners Group and Apex have all set up impact funds or in the process of doing so. And so I want to leave you with this message. Risk return, which was the invisible heart of markets to which Adam Smith referred, has served us well, but today it has become self-destructive. Impact is the invisible heart of markets that is coming to guide their invisible hand. Thank you very much.
Pues
Well, that's a great round of applause there for Ronald Cohen, that he's saying that social impact investment, that could be a great driver there. Let's hope that more and more investors will embrace this model, which is the only sustainable investment model, isn't it? Let's move on to our next panel session. We're going to be talking about the contribution of companies to a sustainable future. We all know, don't we, that three of the key challenges that we're facing in contemporary society are definitely the climate emergency, the loss of nature and biodiversity, and inequality. And we did say earlier today that for the very first time now, businesses, companies are considered to be the most trustworthy by citizens. And in the case of Spain, 81% of all Spaniards are demanding business leaders publicly take up positions to be able to address those social challenges. To talk about all of these issues, we're inviting 4 speakers and panelists who I know personally and do also know that they have personal and professional commitment to sustainability in our world. So let's welcome Begoña Gomez, who's the director of the Chair of Competitive Social Transformation at Complutense University Madrid, Monica Chow, Director of Sustainability at IKEA and President of WAS, Cristina Sanchez, Executive Director of United Nations Global Compact Spain, and Germán Granda, who is the General Director for Etica. So welcome to all of you. A round of applause for them, please. I'm absolutely convinced, and I've said this many times in the past, that the 2 most important drivers for improving the world we live in, for change society, are audiovisual and education. I think they are the strongest drivers to change our awareness in society. So let me start off, Begoña, by asking you, in your chair for competitive social transformation, you're in the Complutense University Madrid, what vectors do you think can be activated to be able to drive forward this transformation that you're promoting from your university chair? And what are the keys to drive that relationship between the private sector, public sector, and third sector, so all of us can pull in the same direction towards a more equal society? Well, thank you very much to Red Eléctrica for the invitation to be here today. Thank you, Miguel, and to my colleagues and all of you here in person and following us through the streaming link. Yes, it is true that there are a number of vectors that could drive this transformation. But if you'd allow me, Miguel, I'd like to take one step back and talk about why we think it's important to be able to promote and drive social transformation in business. Because the private sector is the economic engine that is generating more than 90% of all jobs. It is the economic driver that is generating and promoting all of those products and services that we as consumers demand. So there is this capability that business has to drive and pull the whole society behind it. And I would see almost worldwide, there is a call now for another type of company, another type of business model. Of course, it's still quite legitimate to try and make sure that your company is sustainable and be profitable, but people don't understand a company that doesn't have a social or ecological component to it. And this is also, let me just stress this, an economic, a financial opportunity, because it is one way that companies can stand out from the pack and get that competitive edge. So what else? Well, there are also social companies. In the private sector, as I said, there are social companies, but essentially we're looking at traditional companies, that's 90% of the private sector, and those are the companies that we have to help, we have to work with them, we have to mentor them so that they can take on that role as agents for ecological and social change. Over the last few years, we've been hearing constantly about how we companies or the companies have to achieve SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, so that companies have to be attractive enough for investors to invest in us. But a lot of SMEs also come to me and say, "But how do we do this? I mean, how can I actually put this in practice as a small company?" So in our university chair in Madrid, at the Complutense University, we've developed a whole process for large, medium and small companies to understand how to embed and integrate all of those ecological and social impact factors. They have to embed those ideas, and we have to help them do that. Let me give you an example. Quite often, when people say to me, this whole idea, business strategy with impact, I mean, who should be behind that inside a company? Well, in those cases, my answer is always, I'm sure all of us will have done our own business strategy and have understood how we have to build up an action plan, a strategy plan for the year, and pass it on to somebody else. So if what we want is for there to be really and truly a business plan, a strategy with that ecological, environmental and social approach, the whole company has to be trained in those areas, because I would need my procurement department, my marketing department, my commercial department, when they come to me with those goals, those targets, to also have that gender. No, well, gender, yes. Gender is also part of the social factor as well, and ecological, the environmental factor, yes. So if you ask me, what is the most important things to be able to accelerate this transformation, I would say, as an answer, professionalization. We have to become more professional, and everyone needs to understand what they can contribute to this process in the company. You need to have a purpose. You have to have your ESGs. You need to have your resources, the financial side, the communication, the metrics. And I always like to mention all of these different steps, because quite often people come to me and say, "I've defined my purpose." And then I would say, well, it's like if you're actually just writing a book and you just end up writing the title on the page. You need to be able to define everything else. You won't get the competitive edge otherwise. So become more professional, professionalization. And then what else is really important is metrics, measurements. Something else that we need to be able to properly drive the ecological and social impact is to be able to measure that impact. And if we are to measure that, we need to come up with a metrics platform, a measurement platform that can be used on a recurring basis. There are some in the market, but they tend to be from a diagnosis perspective. They can tell me where I am now, but you need to be able to input the input that you're making today, and then where you want to be in 5 years' time. Because the question is, do you want to just hit your target or accelerate? We sometimes talk about regulatory systems, don't we? But this is more about accelerating the impact that's required from us. So you need that measurement platform that can be recurring, that is user-friendly, and that can be adapted to the models we have in Spain, not just something that is an Anglo-Saxon fit. And it needs to be something that even non-profits can use, that SMEs can use, because if the platforms have a cost, then that will be a break on our progress. And then, let me tell you that if we can't measure that impact, we will never get that long-term projection for sustainability with social and environmental impact. We need to be able to measure it, because that is one of the advantages that we will be able to have access to financing. Thirdly, it's also very important for large companies to be pushing forward as quickly as possible with the processes in-house. The other day I was talking to a construction company, and it's a construction company that has 45,000 suppliers. So look at the traction that can be exerted there by this company, the pull factor. It could also be able to spread out this process to all of its suppliers, because it's not about selecting who is doing things the best out of the SMEs, but companies can also learn. And as a large company, you have a responsibility to make sure that you leave nobody behind in your universe of small suppliers. So professionalization first, then measurement second. Another pillar, which would be absolutely fundamental, is funding, getting financed. It's so important. We need to be able to have that public-private partnership. Then we have to have the process, the selective process, and then you've got your green bonds. Those green the issues rather are starting to grow. It's multiplying in its impact, but the social bonds aren't quite reaching the same point. And I would particularly highlight those alliances, partnerships that I think you mentioned in your question. They're essential, public-private partnerships, and also the partnership with the third sector. Often we talk about the third sector. Why? Because if I'm going to generate social impact and I have local businesses in the community that are able to identify what the weaknesses are, why should I reinvent the wheel if I can use a local company? Maybe it's an NGO, some association. For instance, the other day we were in a panel session with Endesa, the electricity company, and they were talking about how to incorporate gender equality in what they were doing in their regions, and even trying to push forward with demographics, using the local agencies out there. Why should I come up with something and develop something that already exists, was their idea. So that's why these partnerships with the third sector are just as important. Those are the vectors for you. Well, thank you very much, Begoña. Monica, I wanted to ask you, of course, as the Director of Sustainability for a large company, about the role that large companies have. Of course, they have an important role, don't they, if they are promoting sustainability, particularly through innovation. But, unquestionably, when a company is offering a product to consumers, that those innovative solutions have a cost attached to them. And we, as consumers, are we really prepared to pay that additional cost because of that investment or innovation there? How can you actually make these compatible? You know, the need for a company to develop technological solutions that can improve our lives, but at the same time tell consumers that they have to pay more for them. Well, thank you very much, Miguel Angel, for that particular question, and thank you to Red Eléctrica for having organised this conference, which is really making us think long and hard about the whole process, and it's great to be with you today. In our case, in IKEA, this is our position as a company, we see that sustainability is closely linked to accessibility or affordability for consumers. Our view is that if a sustainable transition is really to take place, then it has to be a transformation that can reach as many people as possible. And then Begoña has been talking about training and education and metrics, hasn't she? And we would say that this links up to the very start of the process. What we do essentially in IKEA is something that's called democratic design. That means that when we make a product available to the market, we think about 5 prerequisites that all our designers are familiar with and they have to meet. And if we don't actually meet those criteria that with the product, we don't put it on sale. Firstly, the price has to be, is it a price that most people can afford to pay? Once we think about that price, we think about the function of the product, the design, it's an attractive design, and then quality, of course, everything related to quality and safety. And we also think about sustainability as a criterion. When we talk about sustainability, additionally, we put in that perspective of the materials that are used and everything to do with the circular economy. There's also been a transformation in IKEA, and then and you can all tell me about the urban legends about all of those little black bolts that you have to put in. It's not like that anymore. We have fewer pieces. It's much easier to assemble and disassemble. And we have a big buyback and resell policy now that we can actually give products a second life if necessary. I don't want to take up too much of your time with my answer because I want to make sure we have time for some discussion. But what the answer to you would be, for us, this is very much linked to affordability to ensure that revolution and transformation can reach as many people as possible, and that they shouldn't have to make some big changes in their own lives for this to happen. And our investment or the research that is behind all of our products in materials, well, we've been working with sustainable materials for years, 100% sustainable wood, etc. We have been innovating constantly, maybe in things that you don't actually see visibly. The incorporation of recycled materials, 70% of all of our products include those. But behind all of that, we do so much research, even with natural products from nature, to see how we can increase our use of materials that aren't just recycled, but come directly from nature. I would encourage you to see a documentary that we were presenting yesterday in Seville that we've put together with incredible thinkers from different disciplines, philosophers, educators, architects. It's called Redesigning Tomorrow, and that is really our vision, how all of us with our own disciplines, bring them all together to try and reimagine or rethink out the world. It can be a different world, and it can also be affordable and accessible for most people. Just as, going back to your question, through innovation, which is behind our case.
El documental este.
Sí. Yeah, we'll need to watch it, this documentary. I mean, please raise your hands, those of you who don't have anything from IKEA at home. Okay, well, this is the idea, actually. If everybody has an IKEA product at home and we can trust that this product has gone through a very demanding process to ensure that a number of commitments are met, then I think that's a key message. We also have a role of supporting the companies we work with to support them precisely in that change. So that's, you cannot see that, but that's a part of our work as well. Well, thank you very much, Monica and Christina. I wanted to ask you, this year we are celebrating the 6th anniversary of SDGs since the World Compact. How do you see the progress made by the 2030 agenda in the Spanish companies and businesses this year and how, up to now? And how can we design strategies that promote this agenda and, of course, the profits and competitiveness of companies, which is also legitimate? So thank you very much for your question about the Global Compact, UN Global Compact. We're not only working on the 2030 agenda, agenda for humankind up to 2030. It was a before and an after moment for the cooperative agenda. But we have also been working with the major principles of the Global Compact, responsible and ethical management of companies linked to human rights, environment, anti-corruption, combat. So we are in a very important moment in corporate sustainability. As an anecdote, as a story, the top management of a major company such as Red Eléctrica is here at the front line hosting and leading an event such as this. Such as this one. So I don't know if this would have been possible several years ago, whether such a large company would have been so involved and so committed to these issues. This is a proof of engagement. So we are seeing how management, so the business sector is doing many things. It's not only philanthropy anymore, which is also interesting, but if we want to change the production models for this energy transition and to reduce inequalities, I think that the role of business is self-evident. But it appears to be self-evident, but in such an organization such as the UN, it was a very complex debate. Such a large organization such as the UN that was created for and by the governments of its member states to understand exactly what the role of business was. And we have worked on this for very many years in our organization, and now we can say that we recognize that role. In the Spanish network for the Global Compact, it's been very many years now that we have been working hand by hand with companies, and it is a good indicator that these issues are now being taken on board very seriously by businesses. So nobody can do this alone, not a company or a municipality. No, not one of us can make progress in this agenda towards sustainable development unless we combine many different factors. In the business sector, you have partnerships and alliances, not only public and private partnerships, but also among businesses, with supranational, national, territorial bodies. So there is a challenge there as well to learn how to do better alliances. We also need the support, the full support of the top management of the different companies, both large and SMEs. We need the population in general to be aware of this, and of course the workforce of the different companies. We need citizens that are aware about this commitment, towards sustainable development. Otherwise, this would be impossible. One of these studies that we've done at the UN is how to go one step further. And one step further, which is essential, we need to quantify, as Begoña said, we need metrics. There are many companies that are very much used to this already. There is a demand and close oversight in companies to do this, but we need to identify quantifiable commitments for companies to help different institutions to set up for themselves those commitments. We do have the tools, but we still need to lend them greater support to make them easier for all sorts of companies, big and small. And in the business sector is one of those factors, one of those drivers that can actually generate the solution in many different complex areas, such as the supply chains. As we've been discussing this with Herman for a long time, it's a major challenge for companies 10 years ago and now as well, how to involve the supply chain, suppliers, vendors. So in this sectoral cooperation, I think that companies in the same sector can learn from one another how to actually release that and sort out the difficulties. I think, SMEs, that's one of the major challenges as well, and how to involve them in this. There's already plenty of sectoral cooperation. Red Eléctrica in power supply is one of the sectors that has made major progress there, but this doesn't happen everywhere else. We have analyzed the 10 major economic sectors in the country and what the main challenges are towards reaching the 2030 agenda goals. Regulators are doing a lot to regulate in this regard. Investors, it was very interesting to listen to the previous presentation. Investors, were not invited to this sort of events such as the one we're having now until very recently, and I think this is a very good thing. In the business sector, I think there's a greater awareness now about what the role should be, and but still, I'm always saying that this commitments and this engagement is all very well and good, but it's only on paper. Many companies they say, well, that they are engaged with the 2030 agenda and sustainable development, but it's still not materialized. We need to be more ambitious. We need to act, and we need to do it fast. We are in the decade for action. We do have the reference framework. We have the 10 principles of the Global Compact. We have the regulation. We have the indicators. We have this commitment and this engagement of society as a whole. So now we need to put words into action. Yes, thank you. We've been discussing this morning. We've been saying time and again that this affects us all, and this is something that we need. Everyone needs to be involved. So we are all citizens. We are all citizens and consumers. So let's be aware of the power that we have to generate action among governments, businesses, academia, that they can also promote things and drive things by generating knowledge to help us see how to do things and do them well. Otherwise, we will be just trying to do things and maybe making them worse than rather the contrary. So, Herman, it's your turn now. Finally, so this is. Lately, we in the academic sectors, we have been working in European taxonomy that will be on top of this green taxonomy and for business that already exists. How can you help this to generate a more diverse and fair future? How can social taxonomy help out in this process? Well, thank you. I'd like to thank Red Eléctrica for all the works. It's not only for this conference that we have been supporting from Forentica, but also for the enthusiasm and the drive to try and pass on the message to the rest of the business sector that this process needs to be closely linked to environmental, social, and governance impact that is positive. Commitments. Well, we were speaking about commitments. Okay, well, there are not so many in the end. We can now. We have witnessing now that the COP26 is round the corner. But lots of people say that they have commitments, but only 10% of companies have those sort of commitments, but well, it's already very good, but then we need to put them into practice in this area of the in this social area, of course, which is very welcome. Clearly a clear understanding that there is a role for businesses there in the present context. A competitive social transformation was recommended by Begoña to couple progress in all fields, and both in making profits and also in the social arena. But there are many elements that need to be covered there. I think that Red Eléctrica has done a great job. Employment, quality of employment, training, development, fighting against the gender gaps, and also age gaps, and health. In health, the health footprint that our products and our services making, it's both mental and physical health. This is something that is also necessary, and all these topics, all these elements are now finally getting structured, and now they also have a vision, a global vision, and they are finally seen, and they have visibility rather, and they can be in the sights of investors, which can be quite appealing. This is something that Red Eléctrica has done very well now. My own company is still, has just been born. We are very recent, very young, but we are working on several drafts already regarding these issues. And something that has was a very pleasant surprise to me was the first steps that have been taken in this along this down this road. So we are going to be involving the sustainability areas, the CEO's office, etc. But we will be involving marketing, product development, R&D, and we will need to do in all of those areas, as IKEA is already doing, what the social impact is, and the horizontal dimension as well. Of course, human resources, social and corporate social responsibility, and human rights, and all of those elements will be included in our study, in our survey. And then just to finalize and to conclude, I think it's quite important to understand what the financial impact of the financial and social impact is going to be. It is also linked to the environmental taxonomy that is now under discussion, but quite advanced already in Europe. What a significant contribution actually is. So that would clarify matters when we do understand what is a significant contribution, what actually it means to be significant, and then introducing the concept of no harm, because lots of people say, okay, I just wanted to promote ecological environmental transition, but I mean, probably you've seen this everywhere. Try and help everyone in the business to understand this. And this is also linked to the environmental debate, environmental taxonomy debate in the Sustainable Finance Group. And I think this will be generating a framework for debate that is going to be very closely linked to what companies are doing to lead change in a smart way. Okay, I'm looking at the timer, and time runs by so fast, but everything that you're saying is so interesting. And let's try and see whether we can have time for a second round of questions, and please try to be as concise as possible. Begoña, you were mentioning the Next Gen plan in Spain. I think it's we have some 140 billion, 72 billion of those are grants, not to be reimbursed. So what are the keys in Spain to make the most of these funds, to be as effective as possible, and to make them be devoted to what they actually need to be?
Casi nos tenemos que referir a
Well, I think we have to go back to what we were saying before, and right from the start, that we were saying that the business community is calling out for that sustainability, social impact. And, you know, the next generation funds is 4 pillars. You've got the ecological side, digital transformation, there's social and territorial inclusion. The 4th pillar, the 4th area for investment is gender equality. So if we're generating that environmental and social impact, then should we have to actually bring in all of these factors within the next generation funds are looking at people-centered investment. And I think essentially they're going to really reward companies for their endeavours to create that social impact, and those endeavours can be seen in all of those components that make up the recovery plan and the next generation funds. I picked out 2 that seem to make sense in today's subject. Component 22, component 23. 22 is to reinforce the caring sector and employment policy. 2.5 billion euros in funding, and that's the heading. But component 23 includes promoting an economic, inclusive and sustainable productive fabric. So those are components within the pillars themselves have already embedded all of those words and ideas that we've been talking about in the conversation. And there's 2.6 billion available in direct grants. So these funds, these EU funds, the next generation funds, are an accelerator for the process. I would say that the environmental transition and the digital transformation are I think, a means, a way of protecting our home, which is the planet. So these are the means to the end, and the end is people and planet. I always like to say, and you yourself said it quite rightly, that we all are involved in doing this. It's central government, municipal authorities, regional governments, all of us have to pull together. And why do I say that? Because quite often we talk about the necessity to bring in the local clients. Ana González, a mayor of Gijón, a city here, had brought out a list for bidding specifications that included, for instance, a criteria that is decarbonization, demographic plurality, and taking into account the impact of externalities and the implementation of the SDGs. That was actually put into a tender, bidding specific specifications there. That's so important for public procurement already. And then for partnerships, we have the PERTEs. These are the large-scale major projects, the electric vehicles. It covers the whole value chain with the promotion of the transformation, the ecological transformation, the digital transformation. So I think these next generation funds and the structural funds in Europe remember, are important. Almost 25% of our GDP is public expenditure. So if we're incorporating these criteria into public spending, I think all of us can actually drive the process together. We can accelerate the process in that virtuous circle that we're creating. I don't want to go on too long, otherwise nobody else will get a chance to jump in. Thank you very much. Yes, we talked yesterday and the day before yesterday and today too about greenwashing. Greenwashing is out there, isn't it? Everybody wants to be greener than the next company. But how can companies avoid the greenwashing practices which could end up harming their reputation and perhaps hitting their bottom line negatively? Well, once again, thank you for the question. It's a really interesting question right now in these current times when we're all talking about sustainability. And let me, by the way, just stop again and say thank you very much to Red Eléctrica, as Germán was telling us about, for their track record in Spain, for their engagement, and thank you to to Beatriz for her sustainable leadership for equality, and Fatima with WAS was you've really helped us to actually promote this project, which is a very new project. And thank you to people like you for helping us. So back to your question about greenwashing, all of us seem to be fairly aligned in our approach, don't we? Because it's absolutely clear that we need metrics, that we need to match up with recognized standards, taxonomy as well, then data quality and the materiality, the importance of the factors that we choose, the criteria that we choose. I think we all understand it, that we're all dying to change things, aren't we? We're excited about doing that. It's just like when you're doing something, when you want to do something else that you're so desperate to do it well, you don't know whether you are doing well. So I think we have to be grateful for the efforts that are being made, help people with the efforts, and make sure that we can keep the process in check. It's just like an orchestra, isn't it? Maybe I'm no good at the piano, but I can play the violin. I'm playing the piano. Maybe at the end of the day, that we're not making good music. In the end, we need to make sure it is good music. And if I could just spend a second talking about something else in the discussion, because I think that what we heard before, that video, that was amazing, wasn't it? Congratulations being able to bring us those messages. I just want to mention the invisible hand and financial investment and regulatory issues here in Spain. Let's see if I can keep this as short as possible. We were talking then about the invisible hand. I mean, how markets are steered and the externalities that we perhaps haven't paid attention to for years. And now we have in front of us on the table externalities and how they actually move the market. Because often we have a very pessimistic view of the market, and that's positive too, because that invisible hand that we always think is capitalism, it's not just that one. There are other hands there that have a value attached to them. They've been identified, and they're also steering the market in a certain direction with regard to rules and regulations. Those accounting rules never existed before. There's accounting standards, and now we have the taxonomy there, the social side. I know it's very new, but it will catch up soon. We're in a hurry. But the good news is that all of this, the way we report our business, the way we define our strategies, will ensure that non-financial information, non-financial reporting is up there at the same level as financial information, the reporting we do there, and that will avoid the greenwashing you were talking about. And the last point I want to mention is the regulatory issue. I think it's great. It's very good news that we have regulations and legislation to help us with the transition, but from the point of view of individuals and companies, it's hard to actually embrace all of these changes at the same time. Let me explain. For instance, if just like in the house, one thing is to actually reform your bathroom. Another matter to actually pull down all the walls at the same time. It makes things much more complex. I don't have the answer to this, but I think it's a good thing for us to think about. In my sector, for instance, there are lots of rules that affect us: taxonomy, the circular economy, climate change, and it's hard for us to move that elephant. It's easier if we can move a cat. I'm trying to say that it's a complex moment in time. We have energy, we have know-how, we have a lot of support from the administration, from the government, from businesses, and from business organizations and other organizations. But I think we have to have a big breakfast, get fueled up, and we need to make sure that people are helping us so that the transition takes place in an orderly fashion, and we can act in an orderly fashion and make sure the change takes place as soon as possible.
Well, you were. That's I mean, everything is interlinked. I'm trying to connect, to link everything up, get SMEs as well. How large companies need to help you cannot simply criticize SMEs because they are just trying to survive, and tell them, you play with me and you will be, you are kicked out. No, I mean, those who are not doing things right, we need to help them out and try and make them do things the way they need to do. Otherwise, we will be making things worse. So, but SMEs are obviously, the ones that are in greater trouble. I mean, I have an SME. I mean, I've been a small entrepreneur all my life, so I'm quite familiar with the issues. But okay, in previous examples, let me talk about my area in the audiovisual field. When you see projects and you see and you set things in motion, and and you see that things succeed and things go well, then you try to imitate, you try to do the same thing. So what can we do? So I'm looking at the with a side glance to the timer, because I would need 1 hour to do this. Okay, so we have some 900 partners at the Global Compact. We have almost 95%, which are SMEs. We have IBEX and we have other large companies, but the bulk are SMEs. So in order to survive, we need actually to see what they need, how to help them out for them to be useful, what indicators we need to develop. You've been working with them for a long time, and there was a quite interesting exercise that we did. We took part in the group that prepared the strategy for sustainable development that was adopted by the government in June. We were there on behalf but together with other business organizations. We were there representing this business approach that is so necessary in public policy. So what did we do? We did a poll, a massive survey among all SMEs to see what they needed. And sometimes we are a bit paternalistic, a bit protective with SMEs. Poor guys, they don't know what to do. They can't do this. So when you do this very specific projects, innovative projects, and I think that they get top marks, because even though large companies do a lot, Spanish SMEs have a pull and a courage that it's quite important. With the it is so difficult to innovate in this country, and they need our full respect for that. So we asked them in our poll, in our survey, what they needed. So they said, okay, incentives, resources, and training. Resources, practical tools, easy, simple, with indicators, with goals that they could be reporting and use those reports to tell their focus groups about their results. Large companies are already asking SMEs, do you have your carbon footprint, your water footprint? Do you have the indicators, the results? What are your gender results? So we now have developed those indicators. We have platforms in order to tell them, how to set those goals for themselves and how to measure them up. So we try and support them with those resources. Okay, public contracts. This is public procurement. This is essential. The pull factor that the government has. Same as large companies with their supply chains. This is a lever that we need to be very mindful about. Then it is true that we are already having quite interesting initiatives, but we need to be streamlined and also to be mainstream, rather. So not to punish people who are not complying, but trying to help those who cannot comply or do not know how. Because they don't have the tools. So this is what you need to do. All in all areas of the economy, major investors, large companies, the government. We all need to be stepping in, and that's resources, training, and that's what they need. Okay, Germán. Okay, I had prepared an introduction to the question, but I'll spare you. So what do companies need to do for companies to be sustainable, really committed with sustainability up to 2050? Well, 2050, that's the date. Yes. Well, it would be nice if was now, but yes, because every single ton that is emitted to the atmosphere will need to be neutralized in as soon as possible. Anything that 2050 is the deadline by scientists, but anything that can be done earlier, the earlier the better. So I said that only 10% of companies have set up their own commitments. So we still have 90% of companies. Others have set up their commitments, but it's rather on paper. But maybe even the technologies that they need to achieve them is not even there. So they need to be realistic. And okay, so we need. We're speaking about capitalism, and then we are talking about stakeholders. So for each of the stakeholders, we need to learn how to go about this. We need to have objectives that are science-based, risks that are clearly defined, physical and transitional risks, specific reporting on every single aspect, opportunities for investors, how we can drive the whole of the organization and its value chain. So this is what commitment involves. This is not exactly what we tell our consumers, because the consumers just want to know, what are you going to do for me to help achieve the goal of zero emissions? So today is Friday. Okay. That reminds us, this is done for the future, and for the future are young people, and they want to presidents or CEOs or leaders to be there, to be also active and saying, okay, this is the company that we are promoting everywhere. So this is what we are doing in Forética with the Council of Companies for Sustainable Development. We need to speak about objectives, scope in Forética. We have been invited to Glasgow. I'll be there speaking about this zero emissions commitment. I hope I can give examples of Spanish companies such as Red Eléctrica there. And we will spell out our objectives or targets quite clearly. And just a remark there, when we have a global commitment, an overall commitment of the organization, this is at all levels. For instance, in the financial sector, they have called them to action because they're saying, okay, you have a commitment, but you're investing in companies or in that do not have that commitment, and local authorities or other authorities that have a commitment, but then they are not consistent because they are also making investments or having commercial relations with or others with other groups. So this is something that needs to be quite clear. Governance with capital G. That's also a governance with in the understanding of this with sustainability. Only 50% of the IBEX 35 companies have that commitment internalized in the board of directors. Well, that's something we need to work on. Well, one truth, as the wise man said, is that our actions follow our words. That's a motto. We need to put what we say into words. That's the main takeaway message. Thank you very much. Yes, you can leave the stage, but we will continue. This is just the beginning. Thank you all very much.
Bueno, pues vamos a seguir ahora.
Well, let's carry on. It's now time for us to talk about society in the face of the climate emergency. And to talk about that subject, I'm going to ask Alfredo González to come and join me. He's Secretary of State for Territorial Policy in Spain. And Juan Verdi, please, the President of the Advanced Leadership Foundations, if you could come up too. A round of applause for both of them, if you could be so kind. Thank you. If you could just keep still while we take a photo.
Sabemos que el cambio climático.
We know that climate change is inevitable, but we've also been talking over these last 2 or 3 days about the fact that there is still time for us to limit its most destructive effects, and that we can stop them conditioning the welfare of today's generations and future generations, as well as conserving the biodiversity where we live. Let me start off by asking Alfredo about promoting a balanced territorial approach. How can if we're trying to have more sustainable and more healthy societies and more opportunities for all different sizes of towns, what they're usually suffering? Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Red Eléctrica for giving me this invitation to join you today. Thank you particularly to Beatriz for inviting me, and I do have to apologise for the absence of the minister herself, Minister for Territorial Policy. She had been invited, but unfortunately had to go off to La Palma, to the island, to deal with other pressing issues, and that's why I'm here in her stead. Yes, you're right. We can't talk about the climate emergency or environmental sustainability without taking into account the territorial factor, because when we're looking after the territory, we're looking after the environment in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. The Director General for Public Health in the WHO said that it was only a question of time before we had a pandemic, because the ingredients were all there in the shake-up for it to happen, because of the relationship we had with the environment. And the pandemic has really highlighted this linkage that exists between the health of the planet and human health. As that director said, to be able to defend ourselves against future pandemics, we have to have a good relationship with the environment and make sure that we use the ecosystems properly. That is why a balanced territorial development is so important. As you said, for instance, towns and cities that account for 3% of the land represent 72% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and it's necessary for us to act in towns and cities in different areas at different levels. There are a lot of important actions already taking place. For instance, turning streets into pedestrian precincts. That's to stop vehicles going there. We also have to help people to refurbish their housing, energy efficiency. We can do all of those things in towns and cities, but let's not overlook territorial cohesion and make sure that there are opportunities out there for everyone. The combined impact of the ecological transition and digital transformation can maybe have uneven results, the different results too. We might be able to come up with quality jobs and ensure that we can take people out to other areas in the country. In Spain, 6,800 municipal authorities are at risk of depopulation. There are 8,000 in total. So our recovery plan that is also going to try and tackle the demographic challenge. 130 different measures in different areas to try and bring in entrepreneurship, the ecological transition and jobs. And our ministry in the recovery plan has a very key line there to be able to modernize and promote digital public services in the local governments to be able to tackle that demographic challenge, as I said before. I'll wrap up in a moment. Yes, so territorial cohesion is so important to protect the environment, but also social cohesion and intergenerational cohesion.
Hay que trabajar, ¿eh?
Hay que trabajar.
Hay que trabajar. Los instrumentos los tenemos, ¿no? Lo que decíamos antes de pasar a la acción, ¿no?
Yeah, there's work to be done. And we need to do it fast, because we need it. So, sometimes we discuss this, we have discussed this when the government needs to make extraordinary spending. You need to request a greater effort from those who have the most. And this seems obvious and self-evident, but it's hard. I mean, I would love. I mean, I was wondering this morning. I was thinking to myself, I would love to be in a financial situation that would, I would need to pay a lot of taxes, because I mean, if you pay a lot of taxes, that means that you have a lot of income. So maybe we would need to humanize this. I mean, to make this more personal. I mean, people complain, oh, I had to pay so many taxes, so much in taxes. Well, maybe you should not complain. I mean, you should be happy because you've made a lot of money. So what could we do in green financing for massive retrofitting of our infrastructures and to promote the R&D investment that is so badly needed? Well, thank you very much for inviting us, and thank you to Red Eléctrica and its president. Because we need to do a lot of, I mean, in the US, I've been living there for 30 years. We're in the midst of a green revolution, partly because President Biden, he's 76 years old, and he's not thinking about he's thinking about the new generations, not the next elections. He's taken a lot of very courageous measures. The first major public investment over 3.5 trillion, 3.5 thousand trillion of investment for economic and energy transition in the U.S. I mean, it's the largest ever in public investment history, in the history of the U.S. Why is it so important? We are in a pivotal moment in the U.S. There is such a level of inequality that the competitiveness of the U.S. is in danger. It makes no sense that over 40% of the wealth in the country is in the hands of 1% of the population, and less than that is they are. It is absolutely indignant. I mean, it is an indignity. I mean, it's an outrage that the situation is what it is. So this is why President Biden wants to finance this major project, not in raising taxes, but reallocating the responsibility, the tax responsibility, which is fairer. Warren Buffett says that he is paying approximately 10% in taxes, but his secretary, who makes far less than she makes, is paying 31% in taxes, for 31% of her income in taxes. So this is not fair. Polluter pays. Let's begin by that. But not everything goes. There's 1% of the population needs to be more. Needs to be accountable and assume a greater responsibility. And when things are not fair, when things are not equitable, then that's when everything comes to light. This, because we need to bear in mind that sustainability hits in a vastly unfair manner to those who are the poorest. And they are the most vulnerable layers of the population. So to need to change the behavior, we need to change behaviors and change mindsets. And taxes are exactly fit for that purpose. I mean, that's what taxes are for. I mean, the clearest example is the tobacco industry. When the government saw that it was much more expensive to pay for the medical care of someone who had lung cancer, they until that time, and then actually using the taxes coming from tobacco, well, they just saw what they needed to do, and that's how things are in the U.S.
Yes, that's a good question. Alfredo, back to you. Do you think society is ready to tackle the changes that are entailed by this ecological transition? Do you think there has been sufficient debate in society? We've seen this a lot. I mean, until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't know much at all about sustainability. And then you start to talk about it and you listen and understand it. And only then do you take the decision to seek something that you can do? What can I do in the position I'm in? But I don't know whether people in general, society is ready. I think they are. People are ready. I think the relationship that we have in Western countries with our environment has changed in society. No, but well, maybe the US with climate change, maybe that's different. But if anybody has any doubts left in their mind about it, then they are also starting to feel and see the effects because of the extreme weather events that we're seeing, droughts, fires. So I think society is more and more convinced about it. I think this will be a trend that will continue in the future. I think that these environmental, ecological, nature protection movements can actually rally people around them more than any before. We've got the Green parties as well, particularly in European countries, and we have an environment agenda that is very much embedded into political parties and manifestos and agendas. So I do think society is more and more convinced about this and will perhaps act with more enthusiasm and energy to make sure that all of us, businesses, institutions, we will be more aware of what we have to do to live up to these expectations and demands of sustainability. Young people more than anybody else, they are the ones who are spearheading this process to protect the environment. And there's one factor I think there's perhaps been missed out of those recovery plans. I would rather it's been missed out in our conversation, but it is in the recovery plan. It's all about intergenerational justice, leaving a better planet, a better world for future generations. And one final comment, if I could. Unfortunately, these natural disasters that are becoming more and more frequent in the whole world, and we've also experienced here in Spain this summer with those forest fires that have been much more frequent than the past. I think the work that we have to do, particularly as public authorities, is about prevention, first of all, but then response too. That's critical. We saw that in the case of the forest fires that we had in Spain, collaboration between different levels of government in Spain, a united response, unity there. We saw that in the forest fires, and we're seeing it now in the case of the volcano eruption in La Palma. It's not just about collaboration to try and minimize damage. It's about working together to make sure that financial assistance and compensation is there and available as quickly as possible to help people out with their basic needs. And this country, over the last few months, has seen a process that will change things. It's not just the pandemic, it's the health crisis, it's more than that. There's the vaccination rollout as well. I think we are up there as a benchmark country for our vaccination campaign. On the 31st of August, we were one of the top 20 countries that managed to vaccinate with double dose 70% of our population. I think we're up there at the top of the list for many different reasons, because of our professional health service and our practitioners, our robust health system, and of course we quickly got the vaccines here. But there's another equally important factor, and that was the fact that all institutions, all levels of government here in Spain pulled together to make sure that everyone acted in their own area of competence and responsibility to be able to develop and roll out that vaccination campaign that I said is now a reference point. So that we could do the same with the climate change fight. We can with our response to emergencies. I think definitely our country is going to be more prepared for everything in the future.
Acotaciones breves a esto, ¿no?
A couple of remarks. It was a brutal tragedy, the pandemic, but it brings us a very powerful message linked to what you just mentioned. It is conceptually similar to what the sustainability issue means. If we act together, we can solve the problem. Otherwise, we can't. So I don't think there's nobody who's younger than 18 in this room. Well, unfortunately, because we're always speaking about the young generations, and it needs to be like that. But but sometimes I've heard, this is young people. They need to take the lead. They need to do this and that. But I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we are here together. We are all living in this planet, so we all have the same responsibility towards it. So we are all consumers. We are all citizens. We are all buying things, doing things, and regardless of whether we are 14, 40, or 80. So it's our own responsibility to make a fairer future for everyone. So without technology, without innovation, there's no possibility to create a more sustainable future. So what do you think? What measures should be implemented to increase the technological penetration? Because technologies, yes, we do have them, but they are not equally accessible to everyone in the planet. So what measures should be implemented to achieve this? Well, the set of measures could be very, very long, but let me speak about a common denominator for all of them. They should be strategic on the one hand, and far more responsible on the other hand. So it's economic stimuli measures, promoting growth, etc. But we will be needing to invest thousands of trillions of dollars in the next 5 to 10 years to recover growth, and we will need to do so more responsibly. And what, in my view, we will need to try and rescue or certain sectors. We need to bail out certain sectors in our economy to come to their aid, such as tourism, for instance, as we are already doing now. And money cannot be given freely with no ties attached. I mean, conditions must be imposed if there's going to be a public intervention in a given sector. For instance, airlines, we must make sure that they use that money in order to do a green transition towards more sustainable fuels in the Horeca sectors. For instance, new hotels need to be built along models of greater energy efficiency, and for accelerating the digital transformation is also needs to be also along the same lines as well. Can give you some examples of in the U.S. About how things can do. I mean, I'm not very objective when speaking about Biden. I was part of his campaign team, but what the President Biden wants to make the greatest investment in our and D&I in history. He's already he's created ARPA Sustainability. ARPA used to be a government agency that had several billion dollars in budget at the time, and they needed to make research. But the only goal that any of those technologies needed to be disruptive and change the world. 99 out of 100 times they went wrong, but they invented things that were really disruptive. Computers, Wi-Fi, the internet. And Biden wants to refinance ARPA, and in this case, it will be ARPA Sustainability, because to achieve these very ambitious targets that we have set for ourselves, Biden wants the U.S. by 2030 to have a clean energy mix in only 9 years' time, and for 2050 he wants to have zero emissions and carbon neutrality, full decarbonization. So the ambition level is incredible, and we need technologies, we need human capital, we need human knowledge and research and a revolution in knowledge, actually. So what do you need to speed this up? it's not only resources, money, but also the political will to do that and courage. So you were part of the Biden campaign, and well, all around the planet, even we were there in spirit, believe me, for this victory to happen.
Let me ask you something. Obviously, the urban population has really grown here in Spain. We've seen that, and that brings with it lots of challenges, more inequality, social segregation, an impact on the environment. And there's the risk of a large part of our territory becoming depopulated, and that's disastrous for all different dimensions, for the environment, for society, for progress, for everything really. We were talking about the Next Generation EU funds before, those billions that are going to come to Spain. 37% of the funds will be earmarked for the ecological transition, I believe. So my question for you is, what challenges do you think we will have to face to be able to share out and efficiently use those funds so that we can be developing those tracked plans so that we can have a more competitive and sustainable economy, and that we could also actually take the money out to those areas of the country that are becoming depopulated? Well, the very first thing I need to say when we talk about the Next Generation funds and the recovery plan is that, yes, you're right, some of that is to mitigate the impact of the health crisis, but that it's part of a necessary commitment to further investment. But essentially, this is something that we already had in Europe. We have digitalization and the ecological transition, which are part of European policies and Spain's policies, of course, for some time. They have been for some time. So this new funding package and these national plans, including reforms and investment, are essentially a new revamped commitment to these two priorities that we already had, together with the other two that form part of the Next Generation funds, as we heard earlier, territorial and social cohesion and equality, gender equality, which is the fourth one. What I always like to talk about that third pillar. We've talked a lot about digitalization, ecological transformation, which are the basic pillars, of course, but then we've got social and territorial cohesion, because this funding, essentially what it's going to do is promote a productive change, sustainability, fair distribution, to make sure we leave nobody behind anywhere in the country. The funds, this money, is also a response to that need to have that economic sustainability, to change our economy into a decarbonized economy, with that commitment to innovation, as you were saying, to achieve this transformation. And it has to be a digital economy, but essentially in Spain, the Next Generation funds and the Spanish Recovery Plan have a very salient territorial factor. There's money that will be managed at a regional government level and at local government level, and that out of the 72 billion euros that we are getting in direct grants for Spain, as I said, 70% will be managed at a regional local level. So that's 15% by the local authorities and 55% by the regional governments. To be able to achieve those goals that we've set out for ourselves, we will have to continue to collaborate as institutions at a central government level, at a regional government level, a local government level. We do have already cooperation instruments. We have to continue to work with those existing instruments, and of course we have to work. And this is underlying the plan, work with the private sector. We have to make sure that we are well coordinated in the public sector, and then work together with the private sector, because they will, of course, be recipients of the funding, because there will be calls for them to present projects, and there will also be direct implementation of the funds at a state level. So essentially, we need to facilitate the participation of the private sector. They need to be made familiar with everything that's there for them, that they can actually decide to apply for this funding the projects and make sure we all achieve the targets that we've set out and that we think will make Spain and Europe an area where we will have that just recovery which we need after the health crisis.
Te escuchaba hablar y recordaba, todos tenemos...
Well, we all have a past. Because I used to be a town councillor in Cabarillas de la Sierra, a small town, very, very small town near Madrid. I remember what it meant to be a local authority. Things are there. I mean, that's where the game is played. In small town, that's where municipalities actually, municipal councils now, but it's actually needed. And I believe that there must be a real support for those funds to reach the town councils, small ones mostly, because they are the ones who know what they need. So for municipal authorities, it must come to the forefront. Well, Juan, there is a general idea that, we have a general perception of how natural disasters have become, the norm. I mean, they have become so frequent, fires and earthquakes used to be, something that you heard about once in a while, but now what we are seeing how these natural disasters are having a tremendous impact on our everyday lives. Are they helping us understand better the climate crisis, or do we forget about them as soon as they have gone away? Well, I'm fully convinced that the destructive capacity and the disruption that natural disasters has been completely has been made evident, and the population is fully aware of how what the climate change role plays here. I remember in 2017 we had 19 million climate refugees. I had just moved to Puerto Rico because I had just ended up the Hillary Clinton campaign that we had just ended, and then when we had the Hurricane Maria arriving in our country several months later, and we had to move to the mainland. So we are climate refugees. My whole family, we are climate refugees. In the UNPG. It says that 64% of our population, the world population, it was a survey of almost 1.5 million people in 23 countries. For 70% of the population in the world today, climate change is not only an emergency, but it requires urgent action on the part of government. So I'm absolutely convinced this is a reality, and everybody is aware of that. And let me give you yet another example. The imminent threat, imminent danger, present is COVID. I don't want to say it's not important, because millions of people have died, and this is a tragedy. But according to the UN, we should be expecting somewhere between 6 to 7 million deaths related to climate change. This year alone, we will have some 17 million climate refugees, and according to the IFSL, in 7 years, over 100 million people will be led to extreme poverty by climate change. That is the real threat, the real danger, present and clear danger for the majority of the population. Now, the key lies in the general public. They know that they have the power. They know that they need to buy better and to vote better. And those politicians, politicians should be either awarded with a vote, and they must earn their vote. And when we buy, we must remember that we can reward or punish all those companies that, depending on their behavior towards the environment. As you're doing, you're behaving very well with your replies. I'd like to give you the opportunity to make us free, to give us your free reflections, your thoughts as individuals, as citizens. I mean, just give free rein to your ideas about what you think we would need to do as citizens, every one of us, to contribute to this change towards a sustainable world. You didn't expect this question. Well, yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to answer just as individual, a private citizen, but I'll try. Okay, in the previous panel, as citizens, as private citizens, we are increasingly being made aware. We buy in a certain manner, we recycle in a certain manner. So in our behavior, we try to apply this environmental awareness. And on top of that, there's the mobilization of collectivities, associations, political parties. And as I was saying, there's a larger number of political parties that are entering into their agendas environmental ideas, and green parties are on the rise everywhere, and the environmental agenda is increasingly more present everywhere. So now many of the agendas of countries that are not actually green parties are very similar to those of green parties that are so-called ecological green parties. So both individuals and associations, groups, together with this corporate social responsibility and other elements in the companies, everything on top of each other, these are the building blocks that will allow us, if we persevere, to achieve the goals that we have set up for ourselves. Of course, we are lagging behind, but there have been good news lately. Well, not really as a private citizen, but, well, getting there. Juan, well, voting better and buying better. But what's most important for all of us is to believe in politics again. And I tell you, I'm absolutely convinced. Now we're in a country where the word politics has negative connotations, but politics is the only way to change the world, and civil society needs to play a much greater role now. We have to get involved. It doesn't matter. Anywhere in your community, any group, we need to step up, and we need to step in. Otherwise, someone else will do it for us. We need to be aware of that. We need to be to believe in politics as a way to change the world, but also because it makes. From the ethical and moral point of view, of course, yes, but it makes competitive sense for an economy as well, and then sustainability also makes sense because of the legacy that we want to pass on to our children and to future generations. Well, I still have more time for one more question. I don't want to let you run away. So, what would you... I don't know whether you have children or small children, but what would be the message that you would give to your children, to face the future tomorrow? So what will be your word of advice? What you said before. And it's, you hear it. We cannot just say that the responsibility of what needs to be done falls on the shoulders of the young generation. It's not. Young people are not only the main stakeholders here. Of course, they have a keen interest in us changing things. But we are also living on this planet. Young people need to get involved. We need to ask them to get involved, but we need to listen to them when they ask us to do things. We don't need for them to make protests or demonstrations. We forget about this, but just before the pandemic, there were several demonstrations planned. Greta Thunberg's movement was on the rise, and it's making a comeback after the pandemic now, yes, but let's not wait until they call on our door, until they push us to do things. Let's call them to join us, but let's join them too. So, Juan, what would you tell them, what do you tell them, actually tell them? Yes, I have two small kids. But in a couple of years, what I'd like to be able to say are two words: thank you, and well, try, and you have a full support. And maybe that's what I would like to tell them. And maybe if things do not go down the way they should go, I would ask them. I would need to say, sorry, we are really sorry. Forgive us for not acting as we should have. Well, thank you. Well, let's hope it's the first choice. It's the first one. Okay, thank you. Thank you for this third-degree interrogation that you've been subjected to. Thank you to both of you. Now, thank you very much to both of you.
We're just waiting for the Secretary of State for the economy to join us. But as I was saying a little earlier, I would have loved to have been sitting there myself. So I'm going to make the most of these extra few minutes I have to say a few things myself that I think are important, especially things that we were discussing yesterday and the day before yesterday, as well as today. Over and over again, we've talked about the importance of being people-centered. I think it's dreadful. It's unbearable to think about the fact that the economy shouldn't be sustainable and just. We have to think about the way the economy was actually designed. It was top down. I think it needs to be a bottom up configuration. That we shouldn't have anybody in the world working 8 hours a day and not being able to make ends meet with the money that they are earning every month. I think everybody needs to be able to live a decent life, and that is something we have to really look at again. We've been talking about inequalities today, and this is a big battle that we're facing. We always say that we're really in the last possible moment of time that we've got. We're pushing it back constantly, but the scientists are telling us this quite clearly, and they're saying it's critical. We're in time, but we're only in time now to be able to avoid any major disasters for humankind. But climate change, as we heard from the professor yesterday, he gave us a very, very eloquent picture of the fact that whatever we do over the next 30 years, we've done things badly. It's like a transatlantic liner, that it's going to take a long time to actually come to a complete halt, even if we actually trying to slow it down now. If we don't achieve this, I personally feel that we will be a failed species. If we don't manage to achieve this, maybe this is my own thinking, we don't deserve to be here on this planet and to be able to enjoy what this planet has to offer us. And it's also true that, and this is something that I've heard a number of times, that people say and think that, oh well, we won't be here anyway when all of this happens. That's shocking, because everyone who has children would hope that their children would live better lives than they have. And those of us with grandchildren are probably thinking, well, we won't actually get to know our great-grandchildren, but we are simply tenants here. We are given permission to live here and use their resources, and we have to at least leave the place that we are living in the same state, if not better, than we've seen it before. And I remember about 12 years ago, there was an earthquake, and I was making a documentary, and one of the survivors of that tragedy said to me when I asked at the end, it's called Dreams of Haiti. You could probably find it on the internet if you look for that documentary that I made. So going back to the question, this was a guy who had studied in Spain, and it was he just happened to be in Haiti when the earthquake hit. Decided that he would stay on in that country, and that was the hard decision. It's much easier to go back to Spain and live better, because he said, well, if I don't stay, who's going to look after these countries? And he said. And I said, well, can you picture Haiti in 10 years' time? He said, I picture Haiti as if it were a dream, but not just my dream, but a collective dream, a dream in which we're all struggling and striving to build a better Haiti. If only we could dream together and put our backs into it and start to work together to build a more just, a more equal and better country and a better planet here. This is a fascinating time to live in. Most of us here in this room have probably traveled everywhere, all over the world, and I really do feel myself that this is my home. The planet is my home. You get that impression when you're a world traveler, and when you see for instance, the Amazon rainforest. Well, I'm hurt by what's happening there, just as if they were burning down a forest, a wood next to my home, because I have this social awareness, this social conscience. I believe that we are all part of the same single family. Let's see if we can turn this around. If each of us continue to do our own thing and continue to be individualistic and do that without thinking of stopping that, then I think we're doomed to the chaos that we were talking about before. So to close this, that I can see where the Secretary of State is with us now. I spotted you, yes. In fact, yes. I mean, look, I can be your backup group, your support band, if you like, whenever you go and speak, because I'm filling in for you. But as the presenter of this session, the moderator, I have to say thank you so much for joining us. We know what your agendas are like, and it's you probably never stop all day. But I've been dreaming about making a documentary about political life, and I've never seen people that haven't ended up getting grey hairs. 3 years in the job and in the political life, you end up showing the effects. But it's wonderful to get that support from government. Companies need to be helped, and it's a tragedy, as Juan Verdi said, that we don't believe in politics, because this would just be chaos if we didn't believe in politics, and we need to all see and feel that we form part of politics. I haven't been in politics. Well, I was a local councillor for 4 years. There are different ways of being in politics, but at the very least we need to support our politicians and recognise the work that they all do. People like you. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask our Secretary of State for the Economy and Business Support, Gonzalo Garcia Andres, to come up on stage, because we are all longing to hear from you. Round of applause for him. Thank you very much. How are you? Good afternoon to all of you. I'm delighted to be here today. And I'd like to apologize on behalf of the Vice President of the Spanish government, Nadia Calviño, for not being able to come in the end. Thank you, Beatriz, for inviting me. It's hard to kick off. I have to do my grey hairs. I already had them before I got into political life. The truth is that the whole concept of sustainability summarizes, as very few concepts can do, what our government's economic policy is all about, and also the endeavors of so many companies like Red Eléctrica, all kinds of companies and civil society institutions. It's a word that pulls us together in the same direction, the same track in the early years of the 21st century, that with so many crises, we've seen how fragile institutions are and how fragile the foundations of our economy, society, and how we all need to start to pull together in the same direction. Over the last 18 months, we have tried to implement that vision of sustainability, but it's been done defensively, because we've had to deal with that crisis, which wasn't a financial crisis this time, but it was a biological crisis. And it reminded us of the imminent crisis that we're facing, that struggle against climate change, and it actually reaffirmed our belief that all policies and all of our endeavours need to be aiming at transforming our system so that we can look ahead to the future with better prospects, more welfare, and to ensure that we have more quality in our life and long-lasting stability. Fortunately now, we are on the road to recovery. The health crisis it has been mitigated. There are more possibilities. It's still a threat out there, of course. But above all, we have this Recovery, Transformation, Resilience Plan, Spain's plan, which is an instrument, and it's also an almost unprecedented opportunity for us in this complicated situation to be able to move forward despite it and all of the endeavours for sustainability, social and environmental sustainability, all of those efforts over so many years, so varied, on the analysis side, research, all the work that's been done by governments and business as well as NGOs. In Spain's case, in Europe's case, this is a recovery plan, this opportunity and instrument. It's not just something with the regulatory dimension and the economic or the environmental and social policy side. There's more to it. There is funding there. We have the financial means there because in the past, maybe what's always been missing has been the money to be able to make that that transformation a reality. I think we've learned from the shortcomings, the problems of the way we came out of the last crisis, and we've been able to endow ourselves with this robust instrument. It's going to be used for two things. That plan is to invest money and to reform. That is the essence of this recovery plan, and that is the way the Spanish government has conceived this plan, which was approved back in June. It's not just about making progress step by step towards sustainability. It's about a big step change immediately in the wake of the crisis, the pandemic. So this is a crucial moment in time. Nearly always, when we talk about the economy, what we need is investment. We need to have the amount and the quality of the investment, and what benefit will we get from the investment? What will be not just the financial returns, but what will the returns be for the society and for our well-being, our welfare, to ensure that we have the social, environmental and governance aspects all covered. I'd quickly like to run through those three dimensions, looking at our recovery plan, the environmental side. As I said, this is a prerequisite now. We are being ambitious here in transformation. It will be costly, and people may say, but maybe it's naive to think we can do this, but the reality is that this is a need. It's economic need. It is a necessity if we are to achieve intergenerational equality, and also it's a very smart way of reforming and promoting our economic system to ensure that we can generate even more welfare. So it isn't just from the pure environmental standpoint, but also thinking about benefit for different sectors, including the financial sector, which is actually part of my own remit as Secretary of State. There's a sustainable financing plan from 2018, which forms part of the Union of Capital Markets. That plan, it's now in a development phase. We think it's also very useful instrument. There are three different phases there. You've got the taxonomy side of it. In other words, we have to define which activities are really sustainable so that we can ensure this isn't just some sort of passing fad. It's just pretty words. We need to make sure that we're talking about deeds, and that plan was approved before the summer. And then we have the phase of dissemination, publicity. It's essential for the information to be made public so that we can all take our decisions on the basis of information and make sure that those companies with the best projects and that make the most contribution to environmental sustainability benefit. And thirdly, the investment tools, which will include indices, standards, and climate tagging, and we of course have the European Green Bond. This was all presented in June or July. Nationally, we're developing this strategy. In the case of our Secretary of State's office, we had a very first issue of green bonds. That was Spanish Treasury, following some very meticulous work. Took a long time to prepare the framework, and I think we got the top credit rating there from credit agencies, and it was the very first issue that came out with extraordinary results too. This isn't just about what the issuers want to do. It's a question of supply and demand as well. I think we were 12 times oversubscribed. The interest rate was a good one that we were offering, but the most important thing is that these green bonds will become a structural element in the Treasury's financing possibilities. And they will also help us to provide a trigger for further issues like this here in Spain. Let me move on to that second dimension, which is social development. Social sustainability. This has been governing our policy as a government forever, and it's been part of our response to the pandemic too in Spain. It has required an unprecedented economic policy response. We've had to really rally and mobilize public resources to be able to mitigate the impact of the pandemic, which have been, the impact has been very asymmetrical. It's hit some sectors harder than others, it's hit some sections of the population harder than others, and it's hit some regions harder than others. And we know that we've had to come up with these new furlough schemes. The official credit institute has provided state-backed credit facilities too, and we are still suffering from a basic problem here, which is poverty, particularly child poverty. And we've addressed this challenge with far-reaching instruments such as this minimum living wage, which has been absolutely crucial. One of the pillars in the recovery plan is precisely about that, about territorial social cohesion, which is linked to sustainability, and that fourth pillar, which is of course a hallmark of everything we do in government. It's now time for us to stop taking a defensive approach to trying to protect what's happening and just to buffer and soften the impact of the crisis. We have to now take a more offensive approach. We need to look to the future, move forward to reduce inequalities in society, and also to make sure that we can actually even go beyond basic equal opportunities. There are a couple of salient points here. One is human capital and training. That's essential to get people trained in new technologies with digital skills programs. We need to reform our vocational training system. That will also have an impact on society, and it will also matter for territorial cohesion. In investments, we've taken into account the fact that we have to take all of that money out to every single area, every single corner of the country, even if they are not densely populated. In our ministry, we have an infrastructure program for cohesion, and what we're trying to achieve with that program is, just as during the pandemic when digitalization mattered, we want to make sure that it's an instrument that can actually provide that momentum to those areas of the country. Gender equality is once again not just a social goal. None of this is incompatible with economic growth. We have to, it all works together. We have to take advantage of all these opportunities. Equality too is an opportunity for us. there's also another important element that I wanted to mention, which is to do with the reforms in the plan. What we want to do is perhaps mitigate and find a solution for those structural problems that we've suffered from over decades and that are really preventing us from growing. There is a whole array of reforms in the plan. There's the pressing need. We have to complete this before the end of December 2021, and this is the labour market reform. What we have to do is, once and for all, make our labour market more European-like, reduce the employment rate, reduce the youth unemployment rate, and for young people, but also for the not so young, make sure that employment contracts will be stable and secure and open-ended and offer workers training, and also give businesses the flexibility mechanisms they need to be able to adapt to any technological changes or management requirements. But that always has to be done on a negotiated basis, as we expect in this 21st century to be able to bring in the social dimension. We are now moving into the decisive phase of the preparation of that reform, and we're convinced that together with all of the goals and reforms, we will be able to achieve what we're setting out to achieve, because it is fundamental. It's fundamental for the economy, it's fundamental for the society, and to be able to implement the recovery funding. Lastly, there's the dimension of governance, that G. That's fundamental that both us in Spain and other European countries, we are particularly vigilant about information reporting and diversity. In the European Union, the non-financial reporting directive, which came into force in 2018, is being revised. It's not usual that would happen just 2 years after it being adopted, but that's because it's very much linked to sustainable financing, and that's why I think its review is fully justified. The idea now is to improve the quality, the comparability of the non-financial information that's being reported to the market by companies. So we need to ensure that we have a framework in which incentives and decisions for decisions to be taken by consumers and investors are all working towards sustainability nationally. Spain has been more ambitious than other countries with regard to the non-financial information reporting directive. All companies with more than 500 employees and more than 250 too will have to include environmental issues in their reporting. We believe that this will help to improve the reporting and steer companies in a more towards this great challenge that we're facing, which is decarbonization of the economy. I don't want to take up too much of your time this morning, but I think I would say that once again we have been able to pass a really tough test, which has been the pandemic, of course, social, economic, health crisis that has really basically tested all of our resources here in society. Quite clearly, we are now on our way out of that crisis, on our way up. We've come up with a social and economic responses different, but I think if we cooperate together and we work all together, pull together in the same direction, workers, businesses, and NGOs, the different levels of government here in Spain, including the regional governments, which are fundamental to the response to the pandemic and the success of the recovery. As I was saying, we need to now ensure that all of that energy we feel now and all of that relief that we feel now that we have come out of the crisis and we've been able to withstand the crisis, all of that has to be pulled now to make sure that we can move forward on the environmental, social and the economic front with this recovery plan of the next few years. As I was saying to you before, the key here to be able to achieve this is to pull together, to join forces, with this investment and reform momentum, and that will require a medium or long-term vision to be taken. At the moment, I think all of us in all of our ministries are all of the regional governments and the local authorities. I know Beatriz, it's the case of businesses too. We're all in this urgent mode. We have been doing so much to try and pull together these reforms and investments, and it is important. It's difficult. It's hard to invest properly and also to reform properly for the long term, but that is definitely the recipe for success for the future, to be able to lay the foundations for a more productive economy, an economy that works for all of us, that can provide opportunities for everyone, and above all, that can provide this new horizon of hope and optimism for young people who have already been through two crises, and they will always have that behind them, won't they, weighing them down as they move forward. Now it's time for us to give them that hope and trust for the future, and I'm sure we will be able to do that. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Secretario de Estado.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. Thank you very much to all of you for your presence here. Thank you to everyone who has been following us through the streaming. Fortunately, for those of us here, not those of you online, we will be able to have a sustainable glass before lunch. And thank you, and see you very soon.